A killer used the New York City subway to hide a body. Not nearby inside it, millions of people rode those same tunnels while the remains were there. The city never stopped moving. Number 5 on this list is someone who survived the worst day in American history, only to be killed hours later by a wrong turn. And number 3 is a locked room murder that has stumped investigators for nearly a century. Number 1. His killer used NYC's subway system as the crime scene itself. It was Valentine's Day, 2005. 19-year-old Rashawn Brazell left his Bushwick apartment to meet his mother for lunch. He never arrived. 3 days later, transit workers found garbage bags inside a subway tunnel in Brooklyn. Inside were parts of a dismembered body. More remains turned up at a recycling facility that processed subway waste. His head was never recovered. Investigators noted the cuts showed a level of anatomical precision, the kind that suggests medical knowledge or professional butchery experience. Think about what that means. Someone didn't just kill Rashawn. They planned a disposal method using the infrastructure of one of the busiest cities on Earth. The subway carried millions of riders every single day, and most of them had no idea. Years later, a suspect was arrested, but in 2023, the case collapsed. The evidence wasn't enough. So the question remains, was the arrested man even the right person? Or is there someone out there, someone who understood the transit system in a very specific way who was never identified? Rashawn was 19, he was on his way to see his mother, and whoever did this is, as far as we know, still free. Number 2, a child vanished in broad daylight and no one can say what happened. It was May 25th, 1979. 6-year-old Etan Patz was walking 2 blocks to his school bus stop in SoHo, Manhattan. It was the first time his parents had ever let him walk alone. He never made it. For decades, the case had no resolution, no body, no confirmed suspect, no clear motive. Then, years later, a man confessed. He was convicted in 2017. It seemed like the case was finally closed. But in 2025, that conviction was overturned. The case is open again. Think about that for a second. Imagine letting your kid walk 2 blocks in a busy city neighborhood on a normal Friday morning, and they simply disappear. Etan's case became one of the first child abductions to get national attention in the United States. His face appeared on milk cartons. It changed how the entire country thought about child safety. But after more than 40 years, the legal record shows no confirmed killer, no physical evidence, and no body. A confession that didn't hold. Multiple suspects over the decades, a city that watched a child vanish and still doesn't know the truth. That is what makes this one different. It's not just unsolved, it's actively contested. Number 3, shot at close range inside a sealed room, no killer was ever found. This one should not be possible. In March 1929, neighbors in Harlem heard screams coming from a small laundry apartment. When police arrived, every door was locked from the inside. Every window was sealed. The only opening was a tiny transom, a small window above the door too narrow for any adult to fit through. Officers had to send a child through the gap just to unlock the door from the inside. What they found was Isidor Fink, dead on the floor, shot multiple times at close range. No weapon, no sign of struggle, nothing stolen, no fingerprints except his own. Here's what makes this genuinely strange. Close-range gunshot wounds require a shooter to be in the room. But there was no way into that room, and no way out. Police Commissioner Edward Mulrooney reportedly called it the perfect crime, one he believed could never be solved. Decades of theories followed: a weapon on a string, a modified gun fired through a gap, even suicide, though the evidence ruled that out. None of it holds up cleanly. Nearly a century later, no one has been charged. No motive has been confirmed. The case sits in the cold files, a real-life locked room mystery, right in the middle of New York City. Number 4. The killer shook his hand first, and the room stayed silent for 20 years. October 30th, 2002. Jam Master Jay, the DJ behind Run DMC, one of the most influential acts in hip-hop history, was inside his recording studio in Jamaica, Queens. Two men walked in. One held people at gunpoint and forced them to the floor. The other walked up to Jay. He greeted him, maybe even shook his hand. Then he shot him at close range. Multiple witnesses were in that room. They saw exactly what happened. And for nearly 20 years, not a single person told police who did it. That silence is the most disturbing part of this whole story. Not the shooting, the silence that followed. Prosecutors eventually brought charges, arguing the motive involved a drug dispute connected to people close to Jay. Convictions followed, but one was overturned, and another case is still working through the courts. So the full truth isn't settled. Here's what we do know. This wasn't random. The killer knew Jay. He walked in like he belonged there. He greeted his target like a friend. And then a room full of people who knew the truth, chose not to speak for the better part of 2 decades. Whatever the final verdict ends up being, that part of the story doesn't change. Number 5. He survived the Twin Towers collapse and was killed hours later by a wrong turn. This one is almost impossible to absorb. On September 11th, 2001, the same night as the attacks, a Polish immigrant named Henryk Siwiak set out for a new job in Brooklyn. He had watched the Twin Towers collapse earlier that day. He survived that. He got himself together, and he headed out to work. Somewhere along the way, he made a navigation mistake. He ended up in the wrong neighborhood. Shortly before midnight, he was confronted and shot multiple times. He staggered to a nearby house. He rang the doorbell. Nobody answered. He died on the doorstep alone. By the time police might have investigated, the entire department was overwhelmed by the largest attack on American soil in modern history. Resources were stretched beyond capacity. The case went cold almost immediately. No suspect has ever been identified. No motive has ever been confirmed. Was it a robbery? Mistaken identity? Something else entirely? Nobody knows. Imagine surviving a catastrophe that killed nearly 3,000 people, walking out of the dust and the smoke, and then dying that same night because you took a wrong turn. Henryk Siwiak is thought to be the only murder victim in New York City on September 11th, whose case remains completely unsolved. Most people have never heard his name. The most unsettling crimes aren't always the loudest ones. They're the ones where the city kept moving and no one noticed. Look up one of these cases tonight and sit with how little we actually know. If you're someone who wants to understand the world more honestly, not just the polished version, subscribe. The next video goes just as deep into stories most people never hear.